The Constitution says that Congress may declare war and the Congress may raise and support armies in the Navy. The Constitution also says the president's the commander in chief of the armies and the Navy. We've always had an army under the Constitution because Congress quickly recreated the army. It took 7 or 8 years before we had a Navy because there just was thought was we don't need a Navy, but they eventually created one. There's a dispute today about how to read these two various clauses together. And at the founding, people said that the power to declare war is essentially a power to decide whether to wage war or not. And so that Congress decides whether we're going to start a war and Congress decides whether we're going to join a war, because either decision is a decision to declare war. Right? In the 18th century, if you attacked another nation, you had declared war without ever issuing any piece of paper. Right? And that's why the British Prime Minister, Sir Robert Walpole, said, of late, most of our declarations have come from the mouths of cannons, not from some piece of paper. And so when they gave the Congress this power, they understood that the president could not start a war, because if he started a war, he'd be declaring a war. And implicitly, the president could not do that. By giving Congress the power to declare war, they were essentially saying, and the president can't start a war, nor can the Supreme Court, nor can, any other federal institution. And that was the understanding of Washington and his Secretary of War, Henry Knox, and Alexander Hamilton, and all these folks. And that describes early practices. Before the War of 1812, Madison makes an address to Congress, and he says, we're in this curious position where Britain has declared war on the United States, and we're at peace with them. And he was describing the fact that we hadn't declared war, and he couldn't do anything about it until Congress acted. And of course, Congress then declared war. Starting, I think, in the late 19th and throughout the 20th century, presidents started ordering limited uses of military force. Relatedly, naval commanders started using military force even without presidential authorization to rescue Americans and protect American property overseas. And in the mid-1950s and 60s, presidential advisors concatenated all these episodes and said, see, the president's able to use military force without going to Congress. And in the Clinton administration and beyond, executive branch lawyers said, look, the Congress has the power to declare war, but we should judge our Constitution not by mere words alone, but by looking at practice. And if we look at practice, presidents have used various levels of military force without going to Congress. The most famous example is Truman in Korea, right? A massive commitment of troops without prior congressional authorization. Other people would cite Vietnam, although there was the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. And of course, there were other uses of force by President Reagan and by President Clinton and by President Obama.